and joy I had hoped for, I began to wake up to the trip. I woke up to a whole universe behind the universe. I woke up to the pattern and the presence of the divine behind all of creation, behind everything, even behind me. And that's when I discovered that a desert isn't really a desert at all. My husband, Gary Holz, made his own trip into the desert. He journeyed to the Australian outback in 1994 to stay with a remote Aboriginal tribe. He was seeking a cure for his progressive multiple sclerosis, MS. In Australia, he experienced a miraculous improvement in his physical condition. Feeling returned to parts of his body that had been numb for 7 years. He had been bound to a wheelchair for 2 years, and on the trip home, he clumsily walked down the airplane aisle. The first book we wrote together, Secrets of Aboriginal Healing, is the story of that trip. When he returned, he never became completely free of the wheelchair, and eventually, more than a decade after the doctors said he would, he left his physical form. But that is only a tiny fraction of his truth. After Gary returned from the outback, he became a conduit for miraculous healing energy, and hundreds of people benefited from it, a gift sent from the Australian Aborigines. Years later, I traveled to the same desert to camp with other members of the same Aboriginal tribe. On my trip, I experienced a miraculous transformation of my own. But my transformation was less about physical healing and more about self-empowerment. This is the story of those several journeys. Gary's journey through life after he returned from Australia, my life journey before Gary, and both our journeys together. It is the story of how I met Gary, fell in love with him, married him, worked beside him, lost him in his physical form, rediscovered him in his spiritual form, and continued on, constantly made aware of his love and the love of the rest of my personal spiritual team. Looking back, I can see it was an inward journey, a journey to awareness. And I had the perfect seat, no need to fight for the window in this case. My love story with Gary? That was definitely a large part of the trip. But it turned out that it was also about my love story with myself. Somehow along the way, I learned to love myself. And I mean to really love myself with divine love. How does a person learn to do that? The first thing I did was to roll down the window and start to look for it. Divine love? Once you start to look, you see it everywhere. And then, after a time of amazement and excitement, a funny thing happens. What you're looking at changes you. One way or another, it's not just the window that's open. It's you. And the light is streaming in. You've opened up. With me, it didn't happen all at once. Sometimes it was like breaking open a melon or an egg, hard and sudden. And sometimes it was like breathing in a soft breeze until I realized that same breeze was blowing through me as if I were a loosely woven cloth. Everyone's story is different, and this is mine. Like all memoirs, it is a true story. It is my truth, my experience. Though this book's title contains the word secrets, its intent is exactly the opposite. Gary and I, and the Australian Aboriginal communities who charged us with bringing their principles into the world, want to spread the secrets. May these stories inspire you to discover your own secrets of awakening. Chapter 1. Gunner. A single tear traced its way down Kevin's face. He was normally so taciturn, so emotionally controlled, that the sight of it broke my heart. He had one arm around his wife, Kira. With the other hand, he was fondling little Gunner's ear. Gunner was a black and white terrier mix. The way Kira was nestling the sweet guy in her arms, I could tell he was their baby. They had just gotten the worst diagnosis a pet owner can get. These folks have to be exhausted, I thought. They had just returned from Hawaii on a 10-hour flight. I knew they weren't well off, so it must have been a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And here they were in a crisis situation before they could even unpack. Kevin, Kira, and I were in an examination room at Dr. Hamilton's veterinary office where I worked as a veterinary assistant. I knew Gunner. He had been a regular patient of ours since puppyhood.